Thank you for joining us for one more day of this Holy Week when we are sharing with members of our congregation here at Northside the last words of Jesus as a way of leading up to Easter with commemoration of Holy Week. Today we are sharing with you the words, "It is finished," which were one of Jesus' last words on the cross. It's contained in John 19, verses 17 to 30. And here's the verse. "And when Jesus had received the vinegar, he said, 'It is finished.' And he bowed his head and gave up his spirit." What do you think of when you hear those words of Jesus among his last words while hanging on the cross at the end of that first Holy Week? On the one hand, what a glorious thing for anyone to be able to declare at the end of their lives that it was finished. His work on this earth was done. He had shown in his life and now even in his death how great was God's love for us, that he would give his only Son for us. And not only that, it was a way of showing us in an ultimately dramatic way what God would have us do, to live a life even unto death itself, where we gave ourselves for others. Jesus himself had said that the most important commandments of all from God were to love God with heart and soul and mind and strength, and love our neighbors as ourselves. Yes, giving ourselves for God and for others. And so Christ proclaimed on the cross, "It is finished." As he did so, what glorious words those were, words that proclaimed that his life's mission on earth was complete. Each of us, I think, knows the satisfaction of completed work, do we not? You know, when a job is done well. How is your work on this earth doing? Is it anywhere near complete? Certainly in this difficult time of coping with a deadly virus, when many of us have had to give up our work, it gives us a new appreciation of how important our work is to our lives. And just as Jesus' work changed the lives of everyone on earth, helping us find a new loving purpose for those lives and be able to live those lives knowing that God is with us, so too is this time we're in now a good opportunity to ask ourselves how fruitful in giving of ourselves for others our lives have been. We've also learned how important that work of love is in these troubled days with all of our isolation from each other. For these days have taught us how much we really do need each other. Indeed, we yearn for the days when we can be out again with our neighbors and friends, to know the comfort of being in worship with many others who know God as we do, and to be able to hear words of hope again instead of just the warnings against human contact. God made us to need each other and to love and help one another. So if we carry no other lessons from this troubled time, let that be this one, that God made us to work best when we love one another and can rejoice in the presence and help as well of our loving God. This week we've all experienced also perhaps what happens when instead of loving we think sometimes mostly of ourselves. Indeed, when we hear Christ's words on the cross, "It is finished," if we didn't know the Easter ending and if we weren't a people of faith, one could read that as, well, this is the end. We're done for. Tell me if I'm right that at some time these last few weeks we probably have been tempted to stop having faith and given in to fear. Peg and Mary and I here in our house have faced the same struggles the last few weeks as many of us have. For example, with regard to grocery shopping, having relied on delivery service for some time ourselves, since going out to the store and up and down the aisles have been difficult for Peg and me with our disabling conditions. It's been a shock how quickly people's fears have led to a hoarding of essentials. And that delivery service that we've been relying on now for all intents and purposes is unavailable because so many people don't even want to go to the store. It has sold out deliveries in the service for the foreseeable future, that service that we've been using and it sells it out even 2 weeks ahead and even further. Fear has taken the place of faith for many, you see, and how sad that is. But just as Jesus' words on the cross here, "It is finished," can have a double meaning, in addition to fear and selfishness, so too has this time also taught us how many loving people there are in our world. Think of all the acts of people helping each other in new ways that we've seen in this time of crisis. Neighborhoods turning out while still social distancing, as we've called it, to drive by or walk by the homes of children carrying happy birthday signs so the children will have a special birthday. Or people doing the same kind of thing for shut-ins in nursing homes. And certainly we've all learned how much our church family and our own personal families are needed by each of us, as we miss them so. God made us to love and help each other, and we've learned that glorious gift of love God has imprinted upon our souls in these troubled times, hopefully to be well remembered once the virus ends and we are back together again. Speaking of how much we need each other, I'm reminded of one of those times when I realized I needed the help from my parents when we were growing up. I'll never forget my dad's help when I was in junior high and overwhelmed in a big way by a certain science project that I had undertaken. Our science teacher had all kinds of how-to pamphlets and materials for possible projects. And this one year, I spotted one that really fascinated me. It gave directions on how to clean and mount a small skeleton for a scientific display. So naturally, as one who'd seen chicken bones many times at the dining room table, I said to myself, well, there's a project that shouldn't be too hard. So that's how Charlene the chicken came into our house. You see, to do this project, I needed a chicken with all of its bones and ligaments intact, so its skeleton would hold together. And so my dad took me down to Haymarket Square in Boston, where we were able to purchase a dead chicken that had been plucked, but not cut up in any way, even had its head still intact. We then brought it home and proceeded to work on Charlene, as we nicknamed the chicken, to work on it in our basement, following the directions in the pamphlet. We stripped the bones while leaving the ligaments intact. The only trouble was, to do this, you had to work carefully, and since my growing fingers weren't all that coordinated in those days, it was a slow process, too slow, so that very soon a certain odor began to permeate the basement. I wasn't doing very well, and as the smell grew, I was getting desperate. It was then that I knew I had to call in reinforcements. Unfortunately, my dad was home that weekend, and he came to my rescue. Together we worked quickly to finish the process and dispose of the leftover meat, and soon the smell was gone, after, of course, we'd aired the basement a bit. Then my dad helped further with the difficult process of treating and bleaching the bones, and together we built a stand for Charlene. So I was saved. Yes, I'm happy to report that Charlene turned out pretty well and was kept in the science room of my junior high school for several years as a display to teach other students. But that never could have happened if my dad hadn't been there to be with me and help me to save the day. And so, yes, we've all felt that saving help from loved ones from time to time, I hope. And indeed, we need to remember that lesson in these troubled days, and after as well, when the day comes and we can say of the virus, "It is finished." And what a glorious day that will be. If we are having despairing days right now, remember that Jesus' words, "It is finished," will indeed be true. In God's world soon, there'll be hopeful words. For has it not always been true that in this world God has made that after the difficult times, new life has always followed those troubled times? Resurrection each time, you see, after those more difficult times in our lives. So Jesus, even on the cross, was rejoicing with those words, for he knew resurrection lay ahead. So have hope today, my friends, as we remember how Jesus faced his cross with love, not hate, or selfishness toward others, but rather love and hope. Yes, for resurrection is God's way. It's coming, brothers and sisters of the faith. That's the way it has always been and always will be in this God's world. And even for those whose lives have literally been finished by this troubled time, so will it be. New life lies ahead for them too, with our loving God. So have faith, brothers and sisters. It is finished. By faith and hope and love, new life lies ahead. A joyful time, a joyful finish that will be. Amen.